Hey, it's Sam, and I'm just making this quick analysis of the chart of Barack Obama and the recent difficulties that we're seeing with him and the healthcare debacle. If those who don't know, who don't live in the U.S., we have a new healthcare law that's supposed to take effect in January, and it's been a real kind of centerpiece of the Obama's administration, and it's just kind of laid a big fat turd. It hasn't been working. The website's not working. He's getting political pressure to delay certain aspects of the law so that they can bring the details in line in a way that's fair. People are losing their insurance, breaking his promises that said if you have insurance and you want to keep it, you can. Well, that's not true. The insurance companies are backing out on it because it doesn't meet certain other provisions. So anyway, it's just kind of a mess. And personally, like from my point of view, a lot of people also don't like the fact that they have to either register for this healthcare system, which they don't use. I don't go to I don't go to regular allopathic doctors, or pay a fine. And the reason being is that, well, if you go into emergency room, then people pay for your emergency care. So people that opt out of the system or who aren't insured wind up costing us more money. Anyway, one of the problems is that not having enough time to get registered for this, and then to delay the mandate before you start fining people by a year or something, and he's inflexible on all of it. So anyway, the astrology should be interesting to see. We just, obviously Barack Obama, his natal chart, he's got a Capricorn rising sign. He's got Saturn and Jupiter both retrograde in the first house. And he's got Mercury and the Sun in the 7th house. Rahu and Mars are in the 8th house in Leo. Venus is in the 6th house in Gemini. And the Moon is in the 5th house. So the 7th house ruler in the 5th. He's got a lot of Raja Yogas. Saturn forms Raja Yoga in the 1st house, of course, the first lord in the 1st. And also powerful Raja Yogas in the 7th house with the 9th lord. And also in the 5th house with the 7th lord. So a lot of classical Raja Yogas there with angle lords and trines. He was elected in these dasha cycles as well as first term. He was elected in Jupiter. What was it? It was, I think it was Jupiter Moon. And then he was just elected in his second term in the Saturn dasha. That's why he had such a decisive victory, because his ruling planet Saturn was forming a powerful Raja Yoga by transit on the election last year. He just went into Saturn dasha in July of 2012. So we also just had this huge eclipse in his 10th house of career. Very important. Not only is it this eclipse in his 10th house, so he just had Rahu, the Sun, Rahu, Sun, Saturn, and Mercury in his 10th house with that eclipse, with that solar eclipse. But of course, like we say, Saturn is his ruling planet, and Mercury was also retrograde. So this is a great opportunity for him to go back and address all of these details that screwed up during that Mercury retrograde cycle. That's when we really started seeing people losing their insurance, and that being politicized, of people losing their insurance, and him being able to recognize that there needs to be some sort of course correction, perhaps. Now that Mercury's moving forward, the consequences of that realization is happening, where you're seeing members of his own party, of the Republican Party, and some of his most staunch allies, like Senator Dick Durbin from Illinois and others, are coming out saying, okay, dude, you need to acknowledge that this ain't working and do something for the American people. Like you always say, I'm here working hard every day for the American people, so I'll do whatever the American people, they all say that constantly. Well, what the American people need is for you to honor the promise, not get kicked off their insurance, and to have a reasonable system that we can, like, if you're going to make us register, get the damn system working. Otherwise, don't penalize us come January 1st. There's been a huge decrease in the amount of enrollments. It's a drip compared to what they expected. And again, Obama's being challenged to change his course and to accommodate and be flexible. He's obviously worried that once he does, and once he starts accommodating and making concessions, it's going to be an open door to gut the whole law. Because as soon as he says, okay, this isn't working and we're going to make this concession, then that's a license for his political opponents to come in and say, see, even the president had to admit it's not working, now let's gut the whole thing. So he's in that situation, but again, he's having to walk this tightrope between his longer-term vision of wanting to preserve the law at all costs and not setting a precedent, and also doing what's right for the people and what's fair. So we can see this kind of tightrope, this tightrope by the astrology for sure, with all these planets eclipsed in his 10th house of career, his status. It's the sign of Libra, which is saying, I have to weigh these different things. I have to harmonize what I want with what, with what I want and what I think is best with what my opponents want, and ultimately what's best for the culture. And you're seeing that his political allies are now starting to throw him overboard, because this could have implications for the whole party and for the elections in 2016 and whatnot if these Democratic senators and congressmen stay aligned with Obama and this thing just completely tanks, which on some level he's going to have to address some major concerns. Now, I said a couple weeks ago, one of the things that we're also going to notice is that Jupiter turned retrograde, and it's aspecting those planets. It's aspecting Saturn and the Sun in Libra, the debilitated Sun, which is the debilitated king. This is also why we're seeing this now with Obama. He's literally like the king. He's in that role as the leader, and you're seeing the leaders debilitated right now and eclipsed, and aspected by retrograde Jupiter. Jupiter is about our ideals and our vision. And of course, that's what a leader does. He carves out the vision. This is the great relationship between Jupiter and the Sun. Jupiter is like the minister who advises the king, and then the king is the figurehead who, and the one who bears the brunt and the responsibility of holding that consistent vision and empowering the masses. So we're seeing Jupiter retrograde aspecting debilitated Sun join Saturn being eclipsed, who was also just joined Mercury retrograde. He still joined Mercury. Like I said, Mercury's moving forward. That's what I just talked about before with getting these details and realizing that you need to adjust the details. Now Mercury's moving forward. The issues are moving forward, and he's going to have to adjust. But the reason you see his sort of personal cachet as the king or as the president also being really held down is because the karaka of the king, which is the Sun, is debilitated with Saturn. It was just eclipsed, and it's aspected by retrograde Jupiter, which again is like saying you need a different philosophy. Your philosophies or your status as this leader is now sort of turning backwards. So it's very interesting to see this, and it really is affecting him as a world leader. He's very Saturn-like because he's Capricorn ascendant with Saturn and Jupiter retrograde in his ascendant. He rode a wave of victory on election night after having just gone into Saturn Dasha. So he's very much a Saturn kind of person. We're in it for the long haul, that kind of rhetoric. Saturn and Jupiter, because he's got Jupiter in the first as well. It's a very interesting case study here. And, he has a lot of his own strength comes from the Sun, because the Sun rules that Mars Rahu in his 8th house. Leo falls in his 8th house as he's a Capricorn. So I just find it to be a very interesting case study with these planets moving. Mercury was retrograde, which was reflecting on the details and noticing that the websites weren't working. Also, at the same time that Mercury went retrograde and had the eclipses at the same time was when we saw all of this NSA spying scandal happening all over the world. I talked about that as well. Again, this was also reflective of the king or the government, the power, Obama having to humble himself and apologize to these world leaders for this spying scandal. Again, spying scandal, very much Rahu Mercury. Mercury retrograde, Sun debilitated. Now, Mercury's direct, so that issue was kind of behind us, but at the same time we had the reflection upon this, healthcare law. Now that Mercury's moving forward, we have to move forward with that, and Obama's being challenged to adjust. Meanwhile, Jupiter is retrograde, so the vision, the teaching, the guidance and the vision that was his strength in getting people behind the law is now faded because it's retrograde and aspecting this debilitated Sun. So I find this to be quite interesting.